Wrestling wild cards, the story you thought ended in Paris has only intensified, and it isn't just another rivalry, it's a referendum on loyalty, consequence, and what it means to protect your own when everything is on the line. After the shocking post-match assault that left Roman Reigns sidelined, the conversation across the WWE universe turned to one name, Jacob Fatu. While reports indicated Roman suffered multiple rib fractures and could be out long-term, Fatu's response transformed grief into resolve, reframing the narrative from helplessness to accountability. In a landscape where brand lines, alliances, and power plays constantly shift, Fatu stood up as the embodiment of a principle older than any title belt: family looks after family. What followed wasn't gratuitous violence or vigilante excess, it was the decisive, targeted stance of a competitor from a proud Samoan lineage reminding the locker room, and the audience, that choices have consequences and respect still matters. The tone has changed from shock to clarity, from outrage to purpose, and the reverberations will shape the next phase of WWE storytelling. Paris remembered, the night that redefined the stakes. To understand why the temperature of this storyline rose so quickly, we return to that fever-pitch evening in Paris where 20,000 fans packed the arena to see Roman Reigns defend his championship against Bronson Reed in a bout advertised as a test of resolve versus raw power. Roman was Roman, composed, calculating, and resilient, while Reed proved he wasn't just a challenger but a credible threat with a heavy offense and a presence that commands the ring. When the bell rang, Roman stood tall, belt raised, a champion silhouette against a wall of noise. Then came the turning point, a post-match assault that shoved the moment from celebration into crisis. Reed's follow-up impact and the sudden arrival of Bron Breakker created a storm that went beyond storytelling flourish, leaving Roman in visible distress and the audience in stunned silence. It was the kind of scene that doesn't fade when the cameras stop rolling. Medical personnel, security, executives, everyone felt the weight. Michael Cole's on-air update that Roman would be out with rib injuries wasn't just information, it was a signal that what had happened in Paris would set the tone for everything that came next. The spark in the corridors, Jacob Fatu finds his purpose. Backstage, as updates filtered through and the locker room tried to make sense of the fallout, Jacob Fatu processed the moment not as a headline but as a responsibility. Accounts from within the Bloodline described Fatu as focused rather than furious, a competitor channeling heritage and discipline rather than giving in to heat-of-the-moment emotion. He studied footage, listened to trainers, and compared angles. Not to stoke chaos but to understand what had been done and how to respond within the boundaries of accountability and message. To teammates, he articulated something plain and powerful: Roman's injuries were a line crossed, the response had to be unmistakable and proportionate, not reckless. That posture, measured, deliberate, unmistakably protective, reframed him from a mere enforcer into a steward of his family's reputation, reminding everyone that strength in this lineage isn't just about force, it's about wisdom and restraint. The Performance Center confrontation, message over mayhem. When word spread that Bronson Reed was back training at the Performance Center, the setting, public, professional, and supervised, mattered. What occurred wasn't a brawl staged for spectacle, it was a controlled confrontation in a space where trainers and officials could intervene if needed. Witnesses described the atmosphere turning cautious as Fatu approached Reed with a presence that said more than any shouted threat: "We need to talk about lines and respect." What followed, by all credible retellings, was a hard confrontation that targeted accountability rather than gratuitous harm. Fatu focused on the injury pattern that had taken Roman out, emphasizing through stiff, legal contact and firm warnings that the choices made in Paris were neither forgotten nor acceptable. Staff stepped in, tensions cooled, and a clear message was delivered: raise the bar, respect boundaries, and remember that the human cost is never part of the victory lap. The incident, serious but contained, echoed through the locker room not as gore but as a caution and a course correction. The parking garage encounter, confronting the second domino. Later that day, an off-site encounter with Bron Breakker added a second chapter to Fatu's statement, and again, the salient point isn't chaos, it's clarity. Away from the ring and out of the spotlight, Fatu addressed Breakker with the same consistent theme. Actions have consequences, and the Paris ambush wasn't going to stand as a new normal. The exchange was physical, intense enough to be unmistakable, measured enough to stop well short of wanton harm, and it carried the same refrain that had guided the performance center scene: this isn't about revenge for its own sake, it's about drawing a boundary around what is and isn't acceptable in the name of competition. Breaker, a rising force with pedigree and promise, got the warning straight: the Bloodline will never confuse toughness with recklessness, and it expects the same standard from anyone who wants to be counted among the sport's best. Why this landed: the Samoan standard of honor. What makes Jacob Fatu's stance resonate so strongly is that it flows from something larger than story beats. It draws from a cultural code that values family, respect, and responsibility. The Samoan lineage in wrestling has always blended showmanship with stewardship, reminding the industry that larger-than-life personas are anchored in real values. Fatu didn't speak in slogans. He acted in alignment with a tradition that sees strength not only in power but in poise, not only in the ability to strike but in the wisdom to stop. His conduct read like an open letter to the locker room: protect your peers, do your damage between bells, and when the lines blur, step back into the light. That's why, when word of his interventions filtered to other Bloodline members, the sentiment was less "good, get even," and more "good, get right." The point was never to escalate, it was to reset. Management's crossroads: policy, optics, and precedent. Inside WWE headquarters, this sequence triggered a difficult but necessary conversation. How do you address off-script confrontations while also acknowledging that the original line crossing in Paris is what forced this reckoning? Sources suggest late-night meetings centered on three pillars: safety, consistency, and precedent. Safety means no one should fear for their well-being at work, period. Consistency means policies apply whether you're a main eventer or an up-and-comer. Precedent means whatever you do now will echo later, so choose carefully. For leadership, the challenge wasn't to punish to satisfy optics nor to excuse to appease sentiment, it was to hold everyone to the same standard: no unchecked ambushes, no gratuitous harm, and clear, fair consequences when boundaries are breached. The emerging view inside the office, according to those close to the thinking, was that Paris itself had to be addressed forcefully, and any subsequent confrontations, even when rooted in personal loyalty, needed to be guided back under the umbrella of policy, supervision, and professionalism. Social media thunder, fans, feelings, and the fine line. Online, the reaction was immediate and intense. One group applauded Fatu for standing up for Roman and for the culture of respect that makes big matches feel earned, not ambushed. Another group cautioned against normalizing any off-script physicality, insisting that even righteous motives must be channeled through official avenues. Both sides, in a way, are defending the same thing: the integrity of what happens in the ring and the safety of the people who make it magic. Hashtags trended, fan art exploded, editors cut together timelines of the Paris fallout, and podcasts parsed every frame of the confrontations. The consensus didn't neatly split, but a theme emerged: fans want intensity without endangerment, shock without recklessness, and a product where the story is savage but the workplace is safe. Roman Reigns, healing, horizons, and the long walk back. Roman's recovery remains the emotional core of this saga, and if you followed his career, you already know how this story tends to arc. Roman doesn't just return, he arrives with gravitas, recalibrating the card around him. Reports of fractured ribs and rehab protocols mean the timeline is not instant, and that's fine, the anticipation is part of the build. The questions ahead are tantalizing: does Roman, upon return, seek out Reed and Breaker in sanctioned matches designed to settle accounts under bright lights and strict rules? Does he pivot into a fresh challenger who emerged during his absence, defending his island and legacy by proving that time away never dulls the edge? Or does he choose both, crafting the kind of layered run that puts a definitive stamp on this era? However creative charts it, Roman's next chapter will carry the weight of Paris and the clarity that followed. Bronson, Reed and Bron. Breaker, reassessment and reset. For Reed and Breaker, the past days serve as the kind of reality check that can make or break careers. Both are undeniably talented, Reed with that irresistible blend of agility and power, Breaker with speed, pedigree, and explosiveness, and both stand at a fork in the road. One path is stubborn, doubling down on shortcuts and shock tactics that win headlines but lose respect. The other path is the pro's route. Reasserting dominance inside the rules, reminding the audience that the most intimidating statement you can make is excellence in plain sight. If they take that second path, this entire chapter can become an origin story for maturity, the moment they chose to be the kind of main eventers whose presence sells out buildings on aura alone, not on ambushes in the dark. Creative implications, new boards, new pieces, new plays. From a storytelling lens, the canvas just widened. Roman's absence creates meaningful oxygen on the card, space for a tournament, a gauntlet, an open challenge series that spotlights emerging names and tests established ones. Fatu's ascendance as the Bloodline's protector invites singles programs that explore his identity beyond tag alliances, a chance to show he isn't just a defender but a difference-maker bell to bell. Reed and Breaker, should they choose the path of re-earning respect, can build redemption arcs that crescendo at major events, paying off the lesson of Paris with disciplined dominance. Creative thrives on necessity, and necessity is here, clarity of stakes, clarity of ethics, clarity of competition. That's a winning formula. Culture and code, why this story feels so big. Part of the reason this angle has grabbed the zeitgeist is that it reaches beyond belts and brands into ideas fans care about: family, respect, accountability, and redemption. The Samoan wrestling lineage carries a celebrated code, one that honors toughness while insisting it be channeled with purpose. Fatu didn't snap, he stood up. Management didn't sweep, it engaged. Even the critics weren't hating, they were protecting the principle that wrestling, at its best, is daring within design, dangerous looking without being dangerous living. When a story ties those strands together, it stops being content and becomes conversation, at watch parties, in group chats, and all over the feeds. The line and the lesson, where we go from here. So what's the takeaway as the dust settles? The line is real, and the lesson is simple. Competition can be fierce without being careless. Statements can be thunderous without being reckless. Family can stand tall without inviting chaos. For WWE, that means continuing to codify these moments, firm consequences for off-limits ambushes, clear channels for grievances to become matches, and an unshakable promise that performer well-being sits above any pop. For the locker room, it means owning the standard at peer level, veterans mentoring, rising stars listening, and everyone agreeing that the biggest ovations are the ones you can enjoy for a long, healthy career. Finale, vengeance reframed as accountability. At the start of this, we asked what happens when a family answers a crisis. In the days since Paris, the answer has become clearer. Vengeance, reframed as accountability, can recenter a company around the values that make its best nights unforgettable. Jacob Fatu reminded the room that strength is most impressive when it's disciplined, that heritage isn't a slogan but a compass, and that the Bloodline's legacy is protected not just by force but by standards. Roman Reigns will return, healthier, hungrier, and, if history holds, more inevitable than ever. Reed and Breaker now face the most important matches of their careers, the ones where they prove to the audience, and to themselves, that the best path forward is through the front door, under the lights, within the rules. And the fans? They get what they always wanted, a story with consequences, characters with conviction, and a product that hits hard while honoring the people who make it happen.